All right, and welcome everyone to the traffic calming meeting for Shimen Drive. My name is David Greaves. I work with NDOT, and I'm going to be facilitating this meeting. We're meeting virtually only today on October 30th, 2024, and it is 5:30 p.m. We're going to start the meeting by kind of reviewing what the traffic calming program is, who we are, what we do, and why. Then we're going to get into the specifics of our proposed design for Shimen, and then take a look at how this project will progress from now until construction or otherwise. Um, but to get us started, the traffic calming program focuses on residential streets. So we don't do like big commercial corridors, certainly not like large arterial roads, just focused on places where people live. Um, we do favor physical solutions that encourage lower speeds over significant lengths. So what that means is we rely on kind of physical objects to either deflect vehicles or provide feedback if you're going too fast. And the primary goal of this program is speed reduction on affected streets, and we'll talk a little bit about why that's important in just a minute. There are three E's of traffic calming: education, enforcement, and engineering. Now, engineering is bold and underlined here because it is, of the three, the component that NDOT, Nashville's Department of Transportation, has the greatest ability to affect. So certainly we do education, and this meeting is an example of that. Enforcement is largely up to Metro Nashville Police Department. So NDOT doesn't really do a whole lot of that, but we do coordinate with them closely. But ultimately, we're going to present an engineered solution tonight and talk about how it may help the experiences you all are
Phone.
having on Shimen Drive. Um, we are going to pause in a few minutes for questions, but feel free to put any of them in the chat as I'm going along, and I'll be sure to get to them. Either way is just fine. So the reason that speed reduction is such an important part of the traffic calming program is demonstrated in this infographic we see. And what it's displaying is a pedestrian struck by a vehicle that is going 25 miles an hour has an 89% chance of survival. So certainly that's not as high as we would like it to be, but there is a pretty good chance that they'll get out of that situation okay. Now, as vehicle speeds increase up to 35 miles an hour, 45 miles an hour, or even, we can see that that chance of survival goes way down to just about over a third. So when we see streets in Nashville and observe that speeds are in that higher range in neighborhoods, we observe that there's a problem that we would like to help address. And that is the case for Shimen, unfortunately. Now, this is a really popular program. So when Shimen was selected in March of 2023, there were around 480 neighborhood streets who had applied and not yet been selected and were evaluated for traffic calming. And of those, Shimen made it into the top 25 streets that were selected by a scoring system that we'll dig into in just a minute. So all that is just to say that the data that we've seen does indicate that we have a pretty significant speeding and volume problem on your street, and we're hoping that we can help address that with this project. The traffic calming program has a handful of tools at our disposal. We'll talk about each of them in a few minutes, but there are a lot of things that fall outside of the bounds of work that we're able to do with a project like this. So should we encounter anything that you all would like to see, or maybe come from a different part of NDOT or Metro, we want to make sure that everyone is aware that Hub Nashville is a resource that's at your disposal. So to access it, you can call 311 You could go to hub.Nashville.gov online. And there's also an app for mobile phones that makes it pretty easy to use. So anything ranging from potholes to requesting sidewalks or signals. Maybe there's just debris in the road. Hub Nashville is the right resource to use, and those requests will make it to NDOT and get routed the appropriate ways. To circle back to that scoring system I mentioned earlier, this pie chart sort of breaks it down into its component parts. So when we look at streets to evaluate them for traffic calming, we go out and measure vehicle speeds, vehicle volumes. That's that 45% and 25% pieces of the pie. And we see that those make up the majority of a traffic calming streets score. And the reason for that is the amount of vehicles and how fast they're driving are really the two things that generate the danger that we're seeking to address. So we like to consider that the most heavily when ranking streets against each other. There are those three other factors. So vulnerable user injury or fatality, that's asking in the last several years, have there been pedestrians or cyclists hit by vehicles? Non-driver accommodations is whether or not you have a sidewalk. So on Shimen, there are not sidewalks. So you all would have gotten that 10% scoring boost because we know that if you don't have sidewalks, people will be sharing that roadway space with vehicles, making it extra important that people are driving at safe speeds. And then that last 5% is trip destinations. So that's asking, are there parks or schools nearby? And we want to know that because we know that those two land uses tend to generate pedestrian trips that we want to keep in the top of our mind. So all of that data for Shimen rolled up into a score and pushed it up to the top of that 480 street list. And you all, thankfully have been selected to receive a traffic calming project. So some of that data we like to report on this slide. So the project limits are from Bart Drive all the way down to Tusculum Road. We measured an 85th% speed of 37 miles an hour. That's pretty fast relative to the speed limit, which I believe is 25. So that shows us that a pretty significant percentage of people on this road are speeding and going a speed that we consider pretty dangerous for a neighborhood. The volume is 1,704. That's vehicles per day. So on the day that we went out there, that's how many vehicles we measured using Shimen. That's also kind of a lot. It's not the most we've ever seen in the traffic calming program, but it is a significant amount. It is a wide street, so 30 feet is plenty of room to work with. I think that can have an effect on vehicle speeds, and then it is just over a half a mile long as well. So all those things are things that we'll consider when we do our design, and we can talk about how they affect some of the options at our disposal. And then lastly, this is a map of the project highlighted in green. We can see that there are some other traffic calming projects around you. This is a screenshot from NDOT's traffic calming tracker. It looks like Tusculum Road itself has applied for traffic calming. Ocala Drive is one that's gotten speed cushions, I believe, installed. So if anyone is curious to know what that kind of installation looks like, you've got neighbors that have them up already. And next, we're going to go ahead and talk about the toolkit. But before we jump into that, I want to take any questions that anyone may have about what we've covered so far before we dig into the specific measures and design that we're going to see. Do we have any questions or comments? Okay, well, I will move right along. A reminder that the chat is always open, so feel free to use that if anything comes up while we're presenting. So the first thing in NDOT's toolkit, and the measure that we use by far the most often, are speed cushions. So these are modular rubber devices that essentially act like. Did we have a question from someone online? Okay, maybe not.
I think somebody probably doesn't realize that they're unmuted, so everybody might want to just look and make sure that they're muted.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, back to speed cushions. These are modular rubber devices that work kind of like speed bumps, but they're stretched way out to achieve a higher target speed. So they're designed to be traversed at around 20 to 25 miles an hour and not be too disruptive. If folks are going much faster than that, they'll have more of an impact. So that's how they encourage the lower speeds. They're 6 feet wide. That's a really deliberate width. Basically, the idea is that really large vehicles like fire trucks will have an easier time traversing these with minimal impact, while smaller personal vehicles will be affected by these more. So that's what those gaps in between the cushions are for. And they come in a variety of lengths, just depending on the context and the situation. And those are 7, 10.5, and 4 feet, 14 feet, that is. Some of the photos on the screen show different configurations of these. We basically just put enough to cover the full width of the road. A 30-foot wide road, I think you'll have either 3 or 4 cushions across potentially, but the idea is that we want to space them out such that people can't drive around the cushions to avoid being slowed down by them. Similar to speed cushions are speed tables. These essentially work the same way. They're made out of the same exact materials, actually. The only difference here is that they do stretch across the road and don't have those gaps for emergency vehicles. We sometimes use these when the width of the road is such that we don't feel like we can do a good speed cushion configuration. Because Shimen is sort of a connecting route between neighborhoods, we'll likely avoid these just to minimize any potential emergency vehicle impact. The reason that these are such a popular choice with NDOT in neighborhoods is because they've been really well demonstrated that they have the intended effect. So there's a lot of national research going back to the 90s that shows vertical measures like these do slow speeds. NDOT actually verified this themselves in Nashville's context by doing a study of a few traffic calming projects before and after to produce the data that we're looking at here on the screen. So we can see in those 6 projects, the average speed before came down from 31 miles an hour down to 22 miles an hour, and the 85th percent speed, that's what represents the speed that 15% of drivers are going faster than and 85% are going slower than. That came down all the way from 37 miles an hour to 25. So if you remember, Shimen's 85th percent speed was 37 miles an hour. So if we saw results consistent with these, we could expect that that speed would come down to the speed limit, which would be excellent news from a safety perspective. We can't always put vertical measures in streets wherever we would like. We have some constraints based on grade. So we know that Shimen is in a relatively hilly part of town. So we don't think we'll be able to do speed cushions for the entire length at an even spacing. And when we do that, we'll supplement with some other tools, one of which are radar feedback signs. I think we've all probably seen these before, but essentially what it is a device that will read the speed of a vehicle as it's approaching the sign and report it back to them so that they can see, oh, this is how fast I'm going as compared to the speed limit. And for people who are concerned with that and want to go the speed limit, that can be a reminder to get back down if it's on like a hill or some other condition that maybe causes inadvertent speeding, for instance. Now, unlike the vertical measures, it is off to the side of the road, so it's not going to physically affect the vehicle. It's not going to write them a ticket or take a picture. It's just reporting the speed back. So we don't try to rely on these for an entire design, but they can be a useful tool to supplement a broader traffic calming approach. Another tool we have is narrowing. So on streets that are maybe a little wider than they need to be, it can induce quicker speeds just by having a greater comfort at higher speeds. So we all feel generally okay driving fast on interstates, partially because there's a lot of room to maneuver. We can see plenty far ahead, and it's just not as tight and needing to be nimble with our driving. Um, when we narrow the road with edge lines, we kind of psychologically narrow the road. So it doesn't physically make the asphalt any smaller, but research does show that when you take a roadway that is divided with yellow center lines and has wide lanes and remove those yellow center lines and kind of shrink those edge lines in, that can have an effect on speeds. Now it doesn't go quite as far as vertical measures, and I think that residents of Shimen will know that because you've actually already had that treatment performed, and we still are seeing some high speeds. So we don't suggest that this is, like a complete solution, but it's just another thing that we can incorporate into designs to have another point of suggesting slower speeds over a street's length. At large intersections, we can sort of apply that principle and do things called bulb outs. So this is where we take a really large intersection with a lot of pavement that facilitates fast turning and shrink it down to a more limited area that forces vehicles to traverse an intersection at a slower speed. So we all know on really wide turns or interstate ramps, for instance, we can drive pretty fast through those without a whole lot of trouble. But if we were making a really sharp turn into like a driveway, say, we would have to slow way down in order to make that tighter turn. So that's basically how these work. They also can increase pedestrian comfort by providing a shorter distance that they're having to cross and conflict with vehicles. And in environments that see a lot of street parking, they can help enforce the existing parking regulations that say you're not supposed to park too close to crosswalks because it makes it harder to see pedestrians who are crossing the street. We can also do chicanes on roadways that are very wide. So what we're looking at here is Fairfax Avenue. That's in the Hillsborough neighborhood, I believe. And basically this works by zigzagging a center line over the length of a straight road. Straight roads are pretty easy to speed on because there's not a lot interrupting, just a kind of a straight shot straightaway. By zigzagging back and forth and forcing drivers to do that maneuvering, that striping will slow speeds itself. One of the major downsides of this approach, I'll say, is that it eliminates between half and 2/3 of existing street parking. So in neighborhoods that do rely on street parking pretty heavily, we try to be really careful with how it's applied. And then lastly, at really large intersections, we can consider traffic circles. Those work really similar to bulb outs, basically by narrowing the intersection from the inside out. So these work similar to roundabouts, where if you were making a right turn, you would, just make the right. If you were going straight, you would sort of maneuver around that circle. So it can help with intersections where people are going really fast through them, perhaps at dangerous speeds. And then if you were making a left turn, you would go right around the circle, but then all the way around to make that left turn. So these slow down traffic just by making it, required that you kind of look around and consider everywhere in the intersection before going through. Any questions on any of the tools? Next, we're going to look at the specific design for Shimen and kind of just talk about our thought process, what we're seeing, but then ultimately, hear from you all about anything we may need to look into as we do our site visit and then finalize the design for our construction plans. But
I have a
any,
comment,
oh, yes, please.
if that's okay. I know you are going to show what you have planned for that area, but I just wanted to let you all know. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to let you all know that I had met with a group of the residents out there, and I don't know what you're going to show us that you have planned for it yet, but I just wanted to let you know they really, really wanted some the cushions out there. I have one particular person who is very, very upset about the removal of the yellow line, seeming that taking that out and making the road seem narrow wasn't really doing what it should be doing. And I know I did go riding out there, and I have seen where the speeding and folks going off the side of the road and knocking out mailboxes and things. I know you've had some conversations with some of the residents about that area, but I promised, because I don't know if the particular group that I was talking to is on here or not, but I did promise that I would bring up that about the cushions that they wanted, and they have been calling in to the hub to make that known as well. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing. That's
You.
probably a good segue to look at the. Oh, did I hear another question?
I just said thank you.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's probably a good segue to jump into our proposed design. So let's take a look at that. We can see that we are proposing speed cushions as well as a radar feedback sign on the hill. So we were able to find 5 pretty good locations, and luckily we were able to put them at the beginning and the end of the street. So anyone who turns onto Shimen will immediately perceive that this is a traffic calmed neighborhood that should not be sped on. Now, I do want to talk about this curve because we all notice that it is kind of a gap in the speed cushions. The reason that we're not able to do that, I believe, is the hill. So speed cushions have a maximum grade they can be applied of about 7%. And from what we can tell, it may be higher than that. We're going to do a field visit and confirm if we can find a place along here where speed cushions would be allowed. I think my preference would be to add a set, but we don't want to make any promises we don't think we can keep. Um, but yeah, basically that's the design that we're thinking we might do. But of course, we're here to listen to you and would love any suggestions or feedback, any other experiences y'all may have.
Would y'all also consider the grade where the R is, the radar sign? Um, that's the closest to where we live, and we see a lot of people, skid down the road. They get to going too fast, and they end up in the yard, kind of diagonally across the street from us. So I know you can't make promises, but would you all please review that as well?
Yeah, for sure. When we have hills like that, especially ones that are known to be causing problems, what we try to do is find locations that are as close to the top and as close to the bottom as we can get without going over that threshold. So again, we'll take a look at the physical measurements we make on Shimen and really make sure that we're providing as much calming as makes sense here. Because yeah, we're with you that when we see the kind of driving that you all are experiencing, we want to do as much as we can to address it.
So I've got a quick question as well. So with putting the speed humps in, okay, I'm all for that 110%, think it's the best thing. Cause like we live at the bottom of that hill where the hills kind of meet. So we get the runoff from both directions. So what happens is you come in off of Bart, come down that curve, it kind of starts straight. It's a straight kind of just flat shot. That's really where they start to pick up the speed. And then when you come in off of Tusculum, they're climbing that hill, so they're wide open trying to get up over the top of that hill. And then when they get to the top of that hill, they're just full force at the bottom. And so in the 10 years that we've lived there, like we discussed earlier, our neighbor's house has been hit. Our house has been hit. Our neighbor across the street, her mailbox and crepe myrtle has been taken out. The lady next to her, or the family next to them, their mailbox is taken out, cut back across, took out the neighbor's fence there. There's been several vehicles just totaled down that road. And it's more so because you've got such that long straight shot. But what I'm worried about with the speed cushions, if you're only going to do that flat surface there, you need to do some kind of deterrent as far as the narrowing the road thing. That's total BS. That's not going to work. We've already experienced that. That's not working for us at all there. So I think we should have at least some type of flashing light on each end of that to let them know that speed cushions are ahead. Because what I'm worried about is them coming off the top of those hills and jumping those speed cushions and then airborne and landing in somebody's yard.
Oh, got it. Yeah, understood. So everywhere that we do speed cushions, we have signs to warn drivers.
I think you need
they're
something
coming.
flashing though as they approach it.
I see. We can look into that. It's not something that we default to by any stretch, but let me take a look and see if we have flashing versions of these signs. And
the speed limit sign at the top of the hill, maybe something just to trigger their sight and their vision towards it, so that way they know that it's coming.
Got it. That's good to know. And you said that speed limit sign that exists already?
So can we not get one of those speed limit signs that show you your speed as you approach it?
Oh, I see. A radar.
Yeah, like a radar sign. Yeah, like one on each end with the speed cushion sign underneath it, so that way they know they're approaching the speed cushions. Because if they see their speed and then they see below it speed cushions, and they're more than likely you're going to slow down knowing that it's coming.
Yeah, we can take a look at it. We try not to combine too many signs in one spot. Just generally.
Look, we live there. I'm telling you, nothing works. It's almost to the point that we want to block a road off where you can't get in or out.
I think there's definitely a opportunity for a cushion between Shimen Court and Jenny Murph just before they go down that hill towards Bart. I mean, I'm looking outside right now. There's a pretty flat area that would be a perfect candidate for that. And what Jonathan said about having the speed sign would also be a good addition to that intersection. We see a lot of wrecks at that intersection. And of course, people are building up speed as they're, cutting through to get to or from the interstate. So anything we can do to slow down traffic would be appreciated.
110% agree. I mean, our main thing is we live there. We can't even walk down our road safely in the afternoons or walk our dogs or let our kids play in our front yards right now the way it is.
Yeah, I hear you all loud and clear. And again, I do want to confirm that when we go out and kind of measure the grades of Shimen, we're going to be looking to put cushions wherever we can. So that does include that little gap that we see between the first two cushions. I would love to have one close to Jenny Murph Road. So we're going to try our best to find a spot that works there. We don't have that level of detail available to us right now. So I didn't want to overpromise on what we could do. But if we can increase or make the spacing a little more even, that's something that would result in a better design. But it is good to hear that you all are in favor of that and really looking to see kind of that that more complete traffic calming solution.
Definitely. I'm opposed to the bike lane poles too, if we can keep those out of there. Cause that's just, I know they did that on Bart when they redid Bart, and I don't think it's a good fit on Shimen, because all you're gonna do is they're gonna come down through there and mow them over.
Yeah, understood. We use those in pretty particular situations. For instance, if this was like a bus route and the cushion needed to be in the center of the lane and there wasn't a way to block the edges. But yeah, we don't typically use those unless we like really have to for some reason. But I don't anticipate that on Shimen.
All right, great, thanks.
Cool. Well, I've heard a lot of feedback from you all. Some pretty heavy enthusiasm for as much calming as we can get. Any other concerns or things that we should keep an eye on when we go out and do our site visit and then ultimately kind of finalize that design?
Do you have any kind of a timetable that we might be able to look towards?
Yeah, that's a great segue to our next slide. So I'll sort of answer it by moving on, but we can also return to this slide at any point as needed. So what we're looking at here is the flow chart for the life cycle of an entire street. As we talked about before, this all starts with an application. We had residents apply for Shimen to have traffic calming. We then did that prioritization and selection process, and now we're at our first neighborhood meeting. So here we're talking about the toolbox, the draft concept design, next steps, etc. Next, we're going to move into design. So we typically take around 2 months to complete that field review, take that data, come back and generally make construction plans for the traffic calming design. They basically look like this, but with a little more detail. So we'll see like how many feet from this intersection is that set of cushions, where exactly is that radar sign going to go, sort of that level of detail, so we can hand it to the contractors and have them go out and build it. And then what we can do after that is decide, do we want to have a second meeting to review those plans in detail? Or if y'all would prefer to kind of speed up the process a little bit, we can post those plans online and move straight into the ballot. So that's sort of that fork in the road that we see right there in the middle of the screen. If you all are feeling relatively comfortable with the direction that we're going with the project, we can plan on not having that second neighborhood meeting. But if anyone would prefer to have a second meeting to review those plans and share any more feedback, we're also more than happy to do that. It's really up to you all. Once that ballot starts, there will be a 6-week window where you all receive mailers and then submit votes. And then once all of those votes are in, we'll go ahead and count them. And if 66% of those who voted vote yes, the project will move into construction. Now, you all may notice that construction has a timeline of between 8 and 10 months. We realize that's a pretty long time, especially when you're experiencing such severe speeding. The reason for that is the queue for these projects is pretty long. So the NDOT crews and their contractors are working as fast as they can, but there are a lot of traffic calming projects in line to be built. So we do want to, respect the order that they came in. But after between 8 and 10 months, you all should expect the installation to be complete. Having heard all that, I want to kind of just pause and see if anyone has a preference on which direction we go with the second meeting. Like I said, I'm more than happy to do it. We want to make sure everyone is comfortable with the plans that we're proposing. but it does add a little bit of time to that overall duration.
If we don't have a second meeting, will there be an opportunity for everyone to view the plan before the ballot?
Yes. So when you get a ballot, that's a postcard similar to the invitation that you all got to attend this meeting. There will be a link to view the plans. So they'll be posted online. You can share them, really with whoever you want. But we don't want to have people just voting yes or no blind. You'll be able to go online and check them out.
Is the ballot open to everyone who resides on Shimen, whether they own the property or not?
That's a great question, and the answer is no. So basically, the way this list is generated is the same way that the Zoning and Codes Office does outreach for development projects. And basically what we do is use the data available from the Register of Deeds about each of these parcels. So the mailers will go to the owner's address that is listed on their deed. We do realize that can cause a little bit of confusion at times, but it is the process that this program sort of needs to work with in order to be consistent and regular for each of these streets. We do want to make sure, though, that anyone who is renting knows that they're more than welcome to express their input to the design, as well as reaching out to who their landlord might be and letting them know, like, hey, you may get a piece of mail. We really support this project. We'd love if you voted favorably. Does that answer your question?
It does. So I think what you're saying is that the mailing goes to the property owner, not to the resident, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Will these slides be available for us to view later, or is the recording available?
Yes, so the recording will be posted to YouTube. So Metro Nashville has a YouTube page for all sorts of recorded meetings. But there's a traffic calming playlist, and after a few days, once it gets posted, it ought to be able to be found if you just kind of Google like Shimen Drive traffic calming. I don't think there would be very many results besides this meeting recording.
Sounds good.
All right, so real quick, will these ballots be sent out in multiple languages also? Because we have residents who are Hispanic and Arabic residents, homeowners that live in the area too. And then also too, because I want them to be able to express their concerns, because I'm sure they have the same concerns. And if this wasn't mailed out, maybe in Spanish where they could understand and read it also, maybe they didn't chime in because of that.
Yeah, perhaps. So we're not planning on, or I guess I should say, we don't always send ballots in like all languages. I have taken a note that there are residents here that don't speak English. So I'll take a look, and I'm guessing we'll be able to send ballots in both English and Spanish, just because we've heard that feedback.
Yeah,
but
I think it's
a good point.
Yeah, I think so, because I feel like maybe if we'd have had an interpreter also, that it would have helped them if they had questions as well.
Sure.
I have another comment, if I may.
Sure, please.
I'm going to ask the residents that are on here to also share what we talked about with your neighbors. I know that everybody's not on here. In fact, I know some particular ones that have been talking directly with me are not on here. So if you will share that, because sometimes postcards we overlook. If you'll share, please, what's happening and address how important it is for them to vote, so that we can get something done with this and be on the lookout for whatever you all decide to do, so that they can have a voice in it as well.
Thank you, council member, and I second that completely. And a little more specifically, if you receive a postcard and your neighbor who thinks they should does not, um, anyone can reach out to me and NDOT and request the information that's on there. So my contact information will be at the end of the presentation. We want to make sure that everyone who wants to vote and is eligible to do so does. So when those postcards start to come, agreed, kind of talk to your neighbors, spread the word, make sure that people know what it's about, because we do have a full street's worth of people here, and you know, of course, not everyone was able to tune in tonight. Just a couple of final like housekeeping items about that ballot eligibility. We've been looking at the screen for a little bit, but we don't give owners with multiple properties multiple votes. We remove duplicates. Any properties that don't have buildings on them or are clearly vacant, we won't send mail to. And then operating businesses aren't the residences that we're really looking for. So if there was like a sandwich shop on Shimen, for instance, we would remove them from the list as well. And it's important to know that each of these ballot postcards will come with a unique ID code. So that'll go into the form that you fill out online, or if you choose to call in, you'll tell it to the NDOT representative answering the call. But that unique ID code is unique to the parcel itself, and it ensures that all of the votes we get are legit, so not duplicates or from some other list, things like that. So be on the lookout for that. And if your neighbor like didn't get a card, for instance, they would need to request their own code. You wouldn't be able to just give them yours. I think that's all I've got on balloting procedures and such. And that leads us to just sort of the general questions, comments section. And this, of course, is where my email address is displayed. So feel free to take note of that. I will request if you reach out to me also to copy NDOT TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov. That makes sure that everyone who needs to be in the loop on this project is informed and up to speed. So with that, any final questions or thoughts? I can circle back to any of the slides as necessary.
Just for clarification, 66% of the participants in the ballot have to say yes for it to move forward, not 66% of the owners, right?
That's correct. It works like most other elections where it's only if you vote, it goes into that percent. So in the extreme case, if two people vote yes and one person votes no, that would be successful if eyebrow raising. All right, well, if we don't have any other questions, I'll make sure folks are aware that the traffic calming program has a website at TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov. NDOT also has some social media accounts. You can see those handles displayed here. But otherwise, thank you all very much for your time this evening. It was a pleasure talking about Shimen and how we might help your street experience some safer traffic in the future.
I just want to say, thank you as well. And thank you for everybody who gave up a little part of your afternoon to be on this, because this is very important for your community. So great. Thank you all. And thank everyone who was on here as well.
Councilwoman, thank you for pushing this forward for us too.
Yes, thank you to everyone who has made this happen so far, and hopefully we'll be able to move forward with it.
Yeah, and perhaps all of us need to get together at some point and just figure out kind of what we can do to get our whole road and figure out who the owners are and just kind of push them together and get this done so that way everybody can just agree and go forward.
Metro's property maps list the owners for every property. So, I mean, I know that's kind of like a lot of manual work, but that's something we could probably get together and organize.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
I'm sure. I think the 5 or 6 of us right there at the bottom of the hill, we all own. So I think all of us are all in agreement that that's what we need. I think I seen Miss Harris was on the call, but I'm not sure if anyone else in the area. I can't see anyone else. Just so.
I will let you all know we are able to send the list of people we send ballots to. We're not going to send the codes for obvious reasons, but if it would be helpful, we can send that list to you all if you shoot me an email and ask for it.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I also wanted to just make sure I was crystal clear. Is the preference to skip the second meeting, or should we work on getting it scheduled once the design's done?
I think I think you've pretty much laid it out for us. I don't think. I mean, I was okay without a second meeting as long as we can see the actual design, and that way, if we have concerns, we can voice them later.
Right, I agree with that. I don't think there's a need for a second meeting. I think it's recorded. If anybody wants to go see it that missed it, then they have that opportunity.
Understood. That works for me. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a good night. Bye.
Oh. Okay. We can record. Whatever you do.